Astral Weeks, which came out in 1968 by Van Morrison.
Do we want to talk about the elephant in the room about Van Morrison's views
Yes,
on lockdowns?
I'll bring it up right now because I got a quote
gotcha.
from a Guardian article about it.
There you
The
go.
singer has stirred controversy recently during the pandemic.
In the news.
Yep. This last August 2020, he reportedly urged people to fight the pseudoscience, quote, around COVID-19. And then a month later, he released, at 2-week intervals, a trio of new tracks named Born to Be Free, As I Walked Out, and No More Lockdown, all containing controversial lyrics.
He was also joined by a veritable who's who of controversial English people who supported him, including Eric Clapton, who, he has to have at least one major controversy every decade that makes him look bad. And of course, Morrissey has also joined him in that.
Oh, jeez, of course.
Some of the biggest iconoclasts in English music were in there, so...
Yeah, he's petition. Also, I saw Van Morrison's petitioning like the Northern Irish government or something about artists and performing during lockdown and things of that nature. So he's really anti-COVID. It looks like.
Yeah, well, anti
sounds like
allowing
he's
COVID, I
pro-COVID.
guess. But, yeah. I was about to say, Matt stole my line. I was trying to get there, and Matt just did it so much better than I did. So there you go.
Okay.
He wants to kill people.
So
Continue, Josh.
Yes.
Don't kill that joke, Matt. It was so good, and just don't overtalk it.
Going back to 1968 and in the 60s, Van Morrison was born George Ivan Morrison in 1945 in Northern Ireland. He is a Sir now, courtesy of the UK government, OBE. And he grew up in Belfast, and his father was a shipyard electrician and had one of the largest record collections in Northern Ireland, and this caused him to be exposed to many genres of music like blues, jazz, folk, and country. His father bought him his first guitar when he was 11, and later on he took lessons in playing tenor sax and music reading. As a youth, he played in various skiffle bands as a teenager. Now, I know, Matt, we never really talked about this with the Beatles, but they were involved in skiffle too, right? That was kind of their
absolutely
early influences, or John and Paul, right? Something like that. Okay. And at 17, he toured Europe with his band, the International Monarchs, and made his first recording in 1963 on that tour. He gained more attention as a member of the band Them in April 1964. This is when
remember who opened for them to make them famous?
Oh no, I didn't see that.
God.
Oh, we talked about this.
We did in L.A.
Who
Is it?
opened the Doors?
Oh yes, it is
It
the
was
Doors
the
because I
Doors
have that in my
opened for
notes.
him. Yep, it was Morrison and Morrison. So there you go.
Right.
Continue.
Yep. This is when they started performing the Morrison-written song Gloria, which is a great garage rock song, and had other hits like Baby Please Don't Go. They did a 2-month tour of the U.S., building on the success of those singles in May of June of 1966, which included a residency at the Whiskey A Go-Go in the L.A., and this is where the Doors were a supporting act during their last week there. And Jim Morrison has said, or did say, that Van Morrison was influential on him as a singer and a performer. Them ended up in a dispute with their manager, and they ended up having to return to Ireland due to expiring visas, and then they broke up shortly after that. At that point, Morrison decided to go solo, and Them regrouped and transplanted back to America, where they continued to perform as a band. Now, in 1967, Bert Burns, who was Them's producer, convinced Van Morrison to come to New York City and record for his new label, Bang Records. Morrison signed a contract with him that he didn't read and recorded 8 songs while there. That will come back into play.
Wow,
60s musicians.
Yes. An album was released without Van Morrison's knowledge, titled "Blowin' Your Mind" with an exclamation point, and he only found out about that after the fact when a friend told him he bought the album.
I'm sure that blew his mind too. So yeah.
The other big thing about Bert Burns is that he was associated with the organized crime in New York City, we should say, and that was related to his record label as well. I'll come back to that in a minute.
What was the name of the label?
Bang Records.
Stool Pigeon Records? Bang Records. Oh, okay, yeah.
Bada Bing Records.
Off of one of those songs that he was put out without his knowledge was Brown Eyed Girl, which was released mid-June of 1967. It reached number 10 in the U.S. charts and is probably one of the most well-known songs ever, and definitely his most well-known song.
I don't believe you can start a cover band without knowing
Right.
how to play that song. It's in the ultimate Combing the Stacks cover band playlist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Burt Burns died in 1967, and there's a big contract dispute with his widow, Eileen Burns, between Van Morrison and her, which prevented Van Morrison from performing on stage or recording in the New York area. This is also related to the organized crime element, I believe. After a period of time, Warner Brothers bought out his contract from Bang, or from his widow, Eileen, for $20,000 in cash. And according to the story, the record exec from Warner Brothers had to basically meet in an empty warehouse with the $20,000 in cash and give it to people who were not in the music industry.
That was my second guess. I thought the first was going to be that it was going to fall off of a truck.
Yeah.
They're going to pick it up.
There's also a clause in his contract saying he had to record 36 original songs within a year for the Burns Publishing Company, and then he did them in one session with an out-of-tune guitar, and they were mostly nonsense. And those are actually on Spotify as the album called The Authorized Bang Collection. So if you want to hear him half-ass it to fulfill a contract, feel free to check those out.
Is that the original Sandinista?
Yeah, maybe. Astral Weeks was Morrison's first album with Warner Brothers. It was released November 29th, 1968. It was met with critical praise, or mixed critical praise, I should say, but an indifferent response by the public. It was recorded in Century Sound Studios in New York City in 3 different sessions between September and October of 1968. It is known, it's described as a song cycle or sometimes a concept album. Now, a song cycle is basically a group of songs that are designed to be performed in sequence as a whole unit. So you can probably get that feeling from listening to this album. Morrison recorded the vocals and acoustic guitar in a separate booth, and the session musicians were in another room. The strings and horns were added after the fact, and Morrison said that he did not want the strings added and that they ruined the song or the albums.
Oh, is that would we call that Nico? The curse of Nico?
Yeah, she didn't like that either, did she?
Yeah, I guess so. So the producer on this album was Louis Merenstein, and for the session players, he went on the jazz musician route. And some notables on here, we have Jay Berliner, who was on the classic and acoustic guitars, and he played with Charlie Mingus. And then kind of the de facto leader of the session musicians was Richard Davis on the double bass, and he worked with Eric Dolphy. He approved of the other musicians as well that Merenstein recruited, so he was very involved in the process. Other people of note, John Payne was on the flute, Warren Smith Jr. was on percussion and vibraphone, and Connie Kay was on drums. He's also a notable drummer in jazz groups. Morrison basically gave no direction or had any pre-planning meetings during these recording sessions, and he stayed in the booth and told them they could play whatever they wanted or whatever they felt. That was kind of mixed approval by the session musicians. On the one hand, they said that he was kind of standoffish and didn't really, or was shy, I think was one quote, and he didn't really, interact with them too much. But on the other hand, they liked the freedom that he gave them. And the drummer, Connie Kay, said that they basically just sat there and jammed. And Jay Berliner said that he appreciated the freedom, which was unusual at that time. As I said, there were 3 different recording sessions. They recorded 4 tracks on the first session. Nothing really produced on the second session, and then on the third session, they produced the other 4 tracks. This album has a stream of consciousness lyrics, as you could probably hear. It's said to be considered folk rock or folk jazz, and the cover photo of Van Morrison is taken by Joel Brodsky, who is best known for his iconic Jim Morrison Young Lions photo shoot, which has the famous photo of a shirtless Jim Morrison with his arms outstretched, and basically that most famous photo of Jim Morrison. As I said before, the album sold poorly on release in the US and the UK. I can't imagine why after listening to it for... that's sarcasm. I can't imagine why. Rolling Stone gave it a positive review, saying it captured the spirit of Dylan's John Wesley Harding, and later named it Album of the Year. And its critical standing has also improved over time.
It captured the spirit of John Wesley Harding?
That's what Rolling Stone said. Greil Marcus.
Sound nothing alike.
I know.
Continue. Go ahead.
I guess the spirit is the same.
Yes.
And that's about it. This album, I found a good quote from an author about why this album is considered canonical, which maybe I can bring up after we discuss it. And it does not sound...
Can you tell me what canonical means first, so I know whether I agree with that or not?
Like, if it's part of the canon of rock music, basically. Canonical. Yes. Did I mispronounce it? Sorry.
I just thought it was something with knots, like canonical. Like,
no.
I didn't hear the canon. So continue. I'm sorry.
And so we'll leave it there. I have strong thoughts on this album, which I'm excited to share with you all. But do you guys know? Okay, so let me back up. What was your experience with this album? And Matt, what did you think about Astral Weeks?
Van Morrison. More like Van Morrison. Right?
Great.
I did not know this album at all. I mean, I had heard about it, and I knew that it made many top 10, top 100, whatever, best of lists. If I'm not mistaken, when Rolling Stone first did their top 100 albums, back in 2003 or whenever it was they did. This was in the top 10. Like this might have been ahead of the White Album, but I never listened to it.
No.
So this was new. I was like, okay, I was very excited to listen to this. I was glad that Brown Eyed Girl wasn't on it, because I was like, that's, it's like, because I'm kind of sick of that song.
Yes.
God, this album was not good. It's just so overrated. I don't get why this is up in everybody's list. This was not an easy listen, and actually, kind of piggybacking off of our discussion of long songs. I mean, this kind of, to me, there's several long songs on here that are 3 over 7. One is almost 10, and that's when you talk about repetitive, that's what a lot of these songs are. There's not a ton of melody. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's kind of stream of conscious is a great way of describing what it is, because it's just let's pick kind of like some sort of structure. I mean, there is structure. We're not talking Captain Beefheart stuff here, right? There is some structure. There's some melody, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It drags on. Beside You is a very annoying song to listen to. I was so sick of his voice at the end of that song. It seemed like it just seemed somewhat manic and just disjointed, and it was almost like him, just screaming almost, even though he's not screaming. I think he's got a good voice. I think that there's elements within the songs here that could do something. I didn't hate the whole thing. Like I think one of my favorite songs on here was the Way the Young Lovers Do. I think the chorus for that was a really cool, catchy, type of sound. I liked his voice with it. I thought that was good. I think that Madame George, like the overall structure of that is pretty decent. Astral Weeks, I think, had some positive aspects of it, but it just never went to the next level. It just stayed there, and I guess kept wanting to more with it. And the way it ends, Slim Slow Slider, the way that the album, it just stops. It's like all of a sudden, like they do this, it's a shorter song, and then they cut them with some bongos, and all of a sudden it's like boom, done. And I was just like, wait, it was a very abrupt ending to the album. So it's not a pleasant listen. Again, it's not as bad as Nico or Captain Beefheart, like I said before, but I don't get this. I don't know why people love this album so much. I was scratching my head the whole time. Highly overrated album. No way I'm going back to this.
Wow. All right, strong out of the gate. John, what do you think of Astral Weeks?
So there's Van Morrison that I like. I know you guys for whatever reason, hate Brown Eyed Girl, which is such a weird thing to me since that's a wonderful pop song.
It's more of just an overplayed thing. That's to me, it's just like I hear it at every wedding, and I'm like, all right, I get it.
I gotcha. I gotcha. Yeah, and there's Van Morrison later. I mean, we're gonna cover Moondance, and that's gonna be interesting to compare right here. I've always hated this album. I'm really familiar with this album. I've always hated it. I've consistently put this in my top 10 most overrated albums since I was a teenager, I think. I've often described, so the Way Young Lovers Do is a great song. It's right in the middle of the album, and it's surrounded by songs I would say, like, you have that song in the middle with a tight structure, almost like the structure of like how Brown Eyed Girl is. It doesn't sound like, but it's similar. It's a pop song. You could listen to it in isolation. I have always described this album as basically like, here's what you hear for 45 minutes, like na na ha na, just constant. There's no variation. It's just like na ha, like it's the constant, the same coda, the same. It's hard to know what he's talking about when you do read it. It's a lot of nonsense. It's a lot. He consistently writes explicitly about sex, which is fine, but just bizarrely explicitly at times. But you'd never get it from how he's singing because there's no real difference in terms of how it sounds when he's singing about having sex compared to how he's singing about thinking about someone he's missing compared to how he's thinking about love and loss. It's just always like na na ha na na ha, like over and over again. The instrumentation is way too sparse. It doesn't do anything to kind of compliment him for having that many session players in the album. It's just weird, especially because, I don't know how familiar you guys are with Van Morrison, but obviously Brown Eyed Girl, but like Moondance and stuff. He does stuff that's interesting musically later.
I love Gloria. That was an earlier song, but Gloria, I love that song.
None of that's here. It's like it's basically like everything that you would like about Van Morrison, with in fairness, the distinct exception of The Way Young Lovers Do, which is a song I actually do like. The rest of the album, it just bleeds together. It's, a common 60s, it's overly long. You just don't need this many 6-minute songs, 9-minute songs, 7-minute songs. By the time you get to like Madam George through Slim Slow Slider, it's just... It's like white noise, kind of. It all blends together. I definitely gave it a fair amount of listens this time to see if my opinion had changed from the, every 5 years that I check in on some of the classic albums that I don't love, and now it just doesn't do it for me. I'm not anti Van Morrison, but I've never liked this one, and I don't know if I'll ever like this one.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you guys. I borderline hate this album. I struggled to listen to it. I was put off by it as soon as I started listening to it. I thought of that Ali G segment where he sees the chicken and he was like, what the fuck is that?
What's that?
And this is like a bad jazz album in some respects, right?
Yes.
I can't, like Matt said, his voice is the standout part for me, the one positive that I get from it. But this is like one long bad song, and I really hate how unfocused and kind of freewheeling it feels. I don't like the stream of consciousness lyrics. I don't like the fact that the songs don't really seem to have a structure in a way that is okay on the jazz albums that we listen to, but they have structures in a way that this album doesn't, and it really always kept me off kilter. And I don't like that there's no real like choruses to most of these songs. It just keeps going with him singing in John's impression. And despite the fact that the musicianship is good on the session musicians, none of it really came together for me. John put it best. This has got to be like one of the most overrated albums that we talked about. I can't believe it's so high. Even researching it, people critics like Lester Bangs really liked it, and other people say how much they're moved by it and how much it like really like shook them to their core and it made them ache and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't get it. It's just rambling nonsense.
Especially because we've covered lots of jazz, and I can't think of any jazz album we covered that was I mean, I guess you could say the Dolphy album, but the Dolphy, once again, like the more jazz we did, the more interesting the Dolphy album became to me. It certainly wasn't boring, you know what I mean, or samey at the very least. And then, we've done Blue-Eyed Soul quite a bit, but this is, I don't even think of this as Blue-Eyed Soul really, because it's compared to like, we've done Dusty Springfield in a bonus episode. We just recently did Laura Nero. If we want to go with guys, we've done Buckley and people like that, Scott Walker.
Yes.
All of those albums, while across the board in terms of stuff, I wouldn't say. You know what I'm saying? Like they definitively fell into that realm much more than this did. As you said, it's like a jazz album, but not really an interesting jazz album.
Well, and we've also done folk and singer-songwriter stuff that's kind of, and I think that's one of the things that I'm just most taken up. What I dislike the most about this is the fact that I've known that this has been so highly regarded, and it's just never something I ever went to. So I was like thinking, this is going to be great. I'm finally going to get into this, and then I was just like, did a 180 on it. And it didn't take me long. The second song was terrible. Like I don't get how this is moving to people. I am totally missing out on this. And I don't know if obviously some people found this interesting or influential. I don't know, but it's just shocking to me how positive or how highly regarded this album is.
I can't see this album standing the test of time. I think it must have been something with where it was in the moment and the people who were influenced by it after the fact.
There are still a fair amount of people that will advocate for this album, and I've always chalked this up to something just doesn't click for me that seems to click especially with musicians. Maybe that's why I'm not a musician. I love music, but maybe in terms of the creation standpoint, but it hasn't really lost in its esteem. If anything, I'd say it's held pretty steady.
Yeah, the most recent Rolling Stone, top 500, I think this is like 60 or something.
Well,
so it's
you'll
definitely
still hear modern acts say that they love this album. Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of people that were voted in that one are younger artists, and so it dropped like 50 spots, but it's still up there, way higher than a lot of the albums that we've covered
it's also
already.
Because 30 years has passed since it's there, so when you think of it in that context, it hasn't really dropped all that much.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it. It's also, from what I read, completely different than the rest of his work. So it's kind of like its own thing too.
We'll do Moondance, which is very different than this album.
Yeah. I was not, knowing nothing about this album, I was expecting that there would be either songs I had heard of or like some sort of single or something, and there's none of that on here.
Yeah.
And it's really disappointing.
It's not accessible. It's not. I wouldn't say this is an accessible album.
Which is funny because he had like Gloria and Brown Eyed Girl, which you can't be more accessible than those two songs, and slightly before this, so. It's just weird, isn't it? Because, you have the ability to write those songs. And although, once again, the one thing I'll say is I do think The Way Young Lovers Do is a really good song.
I agree. I did like that song. And that was when, I think maybe the second time I listened through it, when that song came on, I was like, okay, maybe, because I did like that. And I was like, well, maybe if I give this some more of a chance, I can pick up on some other stuff in the other songs. And not really. I mean, there's parts. It's like I said, I think that there is structure here. There are parts that I'm like, okay, I can maybe get along with this, but then since it does nothing more than it just hangs onto it and drags it out for 7 or 8 minutes, it falls flat, But I agree, John. That's a good song.
So to continue with our earlier conversation, this would fall in that category of songs that did not do enough that were long.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Even as a long song fan, I hear everything that you guys complain about long songs. I think that's absolutely what you hear here.
I also don't like songs that you think are going to end and then they just keep going.
with repeating the same general vocals over and over again and.
It's like, you're still screaming about that. His voice is good, though. I will give him his voice is good. It's to say the least. And I just think it's very, with what he's doing here, it's very underutilized. He could Gloria is a much better representation of what he's capable of.
His voice is good, but even this, I don't think you get that on this album because he's just doing the same thing over and over again. And like, how good can your voice be if I don't want to hear it anymore after a while? And that's where you get. I've always felt that way on this album because
I see the potential, John. There's the potential there. You know,
even people that I don't like who I have good voices, it's rare that like I can't tease out, oh, they have a good voice, it's just not my thing, you know. And this, it gets to that point where. I'll give you an example. Like I felt different ways about the Simon and Garfunkel albums, right? From liking them to being, in the middle. But at no point did I say, boy, that Art Garfunkel and Paul Simon's voice, it's just grating on me. You know what I mean? It's like I always was able to appreciate it as good, and it was varied enough that even when I didn't love the constructions, it wasn't because I didn't love their voice. And to me, that's what a great singer has to be. You know, that their voice stays even if you don't love their work.
Yeah.
So yeah, big thumbs down from all three of us on this one.
I wasn't sure how you guys were going to feel about it.
I felt that. Yeah, I was also wondering how you guys were felt. I was tempted to text you guys, but I held off. So.
I was wondering, but I also thought I'll be shocked if either of them like this album. Like I just didn't see it happening.
Yeah. So that's the good thing about not doing prep for this. You get to hear our unfiltered thoughts ahead. For those that ask, we do not share how we think the album went ahead of this. It's always a cold take, real time. So that's a question I get a lot. So there you go, behind the curtain. You're hearing it for the first time. So